Today we are going to discuss about the female uterine. Uterine tube. Female has got two uterine tubes, we call it fallopian tube or oviduct, that extend laterally from the uterus, both sides left and right. The tube, which measures about 10 centimeters, 4 inches long, lie between the folds of the broad ligament of the uterus. They provide a route for sperms to reach an ovum and transport secondary oocyte and fertilized ova from the ovaries to the uterus. So these ova are the fertilized ova, which can be fertilized if the sperms are present over there in the uterus. The funnel shaped portion of the each tube, called the infundibulum, is close to the ovary but is open to the pelvic cavity. It ends in a fringe of finger-like projections called the fimbria, one of which is attached to the lateral end of the ovaries. From the infundibulum, the uterine tubes extend medially and eventually inferiorly and attach to the superior lateral angle of the uterus. Ampulla of the uterine tube is the widest. Ampulla of the uterine tube is widest, longest portion, making up about the lateral two-thirds of its length. The isthmus of the uterus tube is the more medial, short, narrow, thick walled portion that join the uterus. Histologically, if you take the histology of that tissue, the uterine tubes are composed of three layers: mucosa, muscularis, and serosa. Mucosa inside, muscularis in between, and mucosa outside. This is a structure of muscular structure of the uterus. The mucus consists of epithelial and lamina propria, areolar connective tissues. The epithelium contains ciliated simple columnar cells which function as a ciliary conveyor belt to help move the fertilized ovum or secondary oocyte within the uterine tube towards the uterus, and non-ciliated cells called PEC cells, which have microvilli and secretes the fluid that provide nutrition for the ovum. The middle layer, the muscularis, is composed of an inner thick circular ring of smooth muscles and an outer thin region of longitudinal smooth muscles. Peristaltic contraction of the muscularis and the ciliary action of the mucosa help move the oocyte or fertilized ovum towards the uterus. The outer layer of the tube is the serous membrane, the serosa. Local current produced by the movement of the fibri which surround the ovary during ovulation shift the ovulated secondary oocyte from pelvic cavity into the uterine tube. A sperm usually encounter and fertilize the secondary oocyte in the ampulla of the uterine tube, although fertilize in the pelvic cavity is not uncommon. Sometimes we call it ectopic pregnancy. Ectopic pregnancy means doesn't take place fertilization in the uterus, but it takes at ampulla. Fertilization can occur at any time up to about 24 hours after ovulation. Means after releasing from the ovary, the ovum will come through the fibri into the ampulla and ampulla to the uterus, and it can fertilize within 24 hours. Some hours after fertilization, The nuclear material of the haploid ovum and sperms unite. So there is a unification of the sperms and ovum. We call it zygote. The diploid fertilized ovum is now called a zygote, as I have mentioned before, and begin to undergo cell division. We call it mitosis or meiosis, and there is a cell division is taking place. The first division divide when the ovum and sperms unite. It will divide into 16 parts, and we call it marula. And then it will divide into 70 or some figure like that, I am not remember, and that called trophoblast. While moving towards the uterus, it arrives at the uterus 6 to 7 days after ovulation. Uterus. Now, we will talk about some anatomy of the uterus. What is uterus? The uterus is the womb. Womb, we also call it womb. जिसे उर्दू में रहम कहते हैं. Serve as a part of the pathway for sperms deposit in the vagina to reach the uterine tube. The sperms enter from the vagina and enter and reach to the uterine tubes. It is also the site of the implantation of a fertilized ovum, development of the fetus during the pregnancy and labor. During the reproductive cycle, when implanted does not occur, the uterus is the source of menstrual flow. If there is no sperm is present in the uterus, then the ovum will come with the menstruation, because the whole process of menstruation started, which is a 5-day cycle, and it takes about this whole process is release of the ovum from the ovary, entering to the fembria, fembria to the ampulla, ampulla to the uterus. It will take about 28 days. And out of these 28 days, 5 days for the menstrual cycle. Anatomy of the uterus, situated between the urinary bladder and the rectum. So it is present in between the urinary bladder and rectum. Your uterus is the size and shape of the inverted pear. उल्टी सुराई जिसे कहते हैं, उल्टी सुराई, ये pear, नाशपाती, उस shape का होता है. In female who have never been pregnant, it is about 7.5 centimeter 3 inches long, 5 centimeter wide, and 2.5 centimeter thick. The uterus is larger in female who have recently been pregnant, and smaller atrophied when sex hormones levels are low, as occur after menopause. Right? So, in a female who has recently pregnant, means primary, we call it primary, first pregnancy, primary, and another who has got many children, we call it multipara. And smaller, and at the time of the menopause, when the secretion of estrogen and other hormones stop. So there is a atrophy of the uterus. The anatomical subdivision of the uterus includes a dome-shaped portion superior to the uterus tube called the fundus, a tapering central portion called the body, and the inferior narrow portion called the cervix. So this is the anatomical description of the uterus. And this end of the uterus that open into the vagina, between the body of the uterus and the cervix is the isthmus, a constricted region about 1 centimeter or 0.5 inches long. The interior, the interior of the portion of uterus is called the uterine cavity, and the interior of the cervix called the cervical canal. Cervical canal opened into the uterine cavity at the internal os. Os means opening, the mouth, os, mouth-like opening, and into the vagina at the external os. Normally, the body of the uterus projects anteriorly and superiorly over the urinary bladder in a position called the anteflexion. The cervix projects inferiorly and posteriorly and enters the anterior wall of the vagina at nearly a right angle. Several ligaments that are either extension of the parietal peritoneum or fibromuscular cord maintain the position of the uterus, means hold the uterus, because uterus is heavy. It's a very strong muscles. It has got mucosal layer, muscularis layer, and serosa. One, the weight is quite heavy, so it is hold. The pear is hold. The pear-shaped uterus is held by the ligaments and muscles, attaching the uterus to either side of the pelvic cavity. The paired uterosacral ligament, also peritoneal extension, lie on the either side of the rectum and connect the uterus to the sacrum. The cardinal lateral cervical ligaments are located to inferior to the base of the broad ligament and extend from the pelvic wall to the cervix and vagina. In that way, it's hold and control, and it won't come out. If these ligaments during delivery or with the age, they get weaker and weaker because of the weight of uterus. And sometimes it gives an effect to the female, and we call it prolapse of the, the, the os of the external os of the uterus, the cervix. It comes out from the vagina, and we call it prolapse to that female. It has happened during delivery also, or because of weakness of those ligaments. The round ligament are band of the fibrous connective tissue between the layer of the broad ligament. It extends from a point on the uterus just inferior to the uterine tube to a portion of labia majora of the external genitalia. Labia majora and labia minora is present on the top of the vagina. The thick portion is known as labia majora, and the thin portion of the vagina is known as labia minora. Although the ligaments normally maintain the antiflux portion of the uterus, they also call the uterine body enough movement such that uterus may become malpositioned. A posterior title of the uterus called the retroreflection, retro backward or behind, is a harmless variation of the normal position of the uterus. There is often no cause for the condition, but it may occur after childbirth. Means little disposition of the uterus anatomically. Histology of the uterus. Histology. The uterus consists of three layers: peritoneum, perimetrium, myometrium, and endometrium. This is the name of the muscles. Perimetrium means outer layer of the uterus. Myometrium means muscular layer of the uterus. Endometrium means inside layer of the uterus. The outer layer, the perimetrium, around or serous. Outer layer is known as serous. That is the perimetrium. It is a part of the visceral peritoneum. It is composed of simple squamous epithelial and areolar connective tissues. Laterally, it becomes the broad ligament. Anteriorly, it covers the urinary bladder and forms a shallow pouch the vesicotrine pouch, bladder. Posteriorly, it covers the rectum and form a deep pouch between the uterus and the urine bladder, the retrouterine pouch or pouch of the Douglas, the most inferior point in the pelvic cavity. The middle layer of the uterus, the myometrium, consists of three layers of the smooth muscle fibers that are thick in the fundus and thinnest in the cervix. The thicker middle layer is circular. The inner and outer layer are longitudinal or oblique. During labor and childbirth, coordinated contraction of the myometrium is responsible to oxytocin from the posterior pituitary gland helps the, expel the fetus from the uterus. Means at the time of the delivery, there is a contraction of uterus take place, and this is because there is a feedback mechanism and which help through the pituitary gland of the posterior lobe release a hormone known as oxytocin. The inner layer of the uterus, the endometrium, is highly vascularized and has three components. Number one, an innermost layer composed of simple columnar epithelium ciliated with secretory cells line the lumen. Number two, an underlying endometrium stroma is a very thick region of lamina propria areolar connective tissues. Endometrium uterine glands develop an invagination of the luminal epithelium and extend almost to the myometrium. The endometrium is divided into two layers. The stratum functionalis, functional layer, lines the uterine cavity and slot off during menstruation. Means it will comes out. We call it shuttering. A place of the endometrium means inner layer of the uterus is shutter means break down and comes out during the time of menstruation. The deeper layer, the stratum bacillus, basal layer is permanent and gives rise to a new stratum functional after each menstruation. So this inner layer develops again and again and again after every menstruation cycle. Branches of the internal iliac artery called the uterine arteries supply blood to the uterus. Uterus arteries give off branches called the arcuate arteries, shaped like a bow that are arranged in a circular fashion in myometrium. These anterior branches into the radial artery that penetrate deeper into the myometrium just before the branches enter the endometrium. They divide into two kinds of arterioles, means small arteries. Straight arterioles supply the stratum bacillus with the material needed to regenerate the stratum functionalis. Spiral arterioles supply the stratum functional and change markedly during the menstrual cycle. Blood leaves the uterus is drained by the uterine vein into the internal iliac vein. The extensive blood supply of the uterus is essential to support regrowth of a new stratum functionalis. Means every month this layer will shutter down and comes out in the menses and again it will regenerate. Implantation of the fertilized ovum and development of the placenta. This functional stratum functionalis also help implantation of the fertilized ovum in the endometrium, and also when there is a pregnancy take place, then there is a connection between the mother and the embryo with the help of placenta, a tube-like structure. So today we have covered about some structures of the female reproductive organ in which we have mostly defined the uterus, and from the uterus two laterally tubes comes out, and that is known as ampulla. And at the end of the ampulla is finger-like projection. We call it fembreo. And in front of the fembreo are left and right side are ovaries. We have also discussed about the uterus wall is consists of three layers, rich of blood supplies, and the innermost layer, endometrium, will shutter down, which is known as statin functionalis, every month at the time of the menses, and it, it will throw out the vagina, and we call it maturation. And after this shutting down of the statin functionalis, a new statin functionalis will develop after the completion of the maturation cycle. This is all about today. So we will see you in the next lecture. Thank you very much.